Hi guys, welcome to Office Blokes React. I'm Office Bloke Dave.
I'm Office Bloke Mike.
Office Bloke Daz.
Together with the Office Blokes, aren't we?
Yes, indeed.
There we are.
Yeah, now if you go over to our second channel, it's named the Office Blokes second channel. It's really creative.
That's good work, that, Dave.
Yeah.
Was you in marketing before you were an Office Bloke?
Absolutely.
Or did you work at the market? One of them.
I actually just pioneered second channels. No one had a second channel before.
Oh, did they not?
Right, fair enough.
Invented it.
Yeah,
Fair
we
enough.
invented it.
Well done, mate.
Long before we were even creating content.
I'll get you one of the massive WNBA cups.
Yeah. Yeah, if you head over there, we're going to start releasing some original content over there in the next couple of weeks, and you don't want to miss it because it's just going to be fun.
No, special.
Yeah, very special. Right then, the UFC might be in big trouble.
Oh, yeah. Over what?
What's that? Yeah.
If this is what I've read about, I think the UFC are being sued by 1,200 fighters or 2,000 fighters.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
I don't know what over, maybe safety concerns or something.
Yeah.
But
I'm going to join this league. It's a combat sport where it's like bare knuckle fisting almost and kicking people in the
bare
head.
knuckle what?
Yeah. That'd be a better sport, wouldn't it? Hey, come here, Conor McGregor. Whoosh.
Jesus Christ. If it is that, then that's what it is. But it's a new video talking about the UFC being in trouble, so I presume
Right,
it's going to be that.
Let's have a look.
Yeah, hopefully no fisting involved.
I hope there is.
Let's do it. The UFC may be in big trouble.
So if you haven't heard, a judge in a $5 billion lawsuit against the UFC just literally called UFC contracts ruthless and coercive, that the promotion was suppressing fighter compensation, and was engaging in anti-competitive conduct. A pretty damning set of statements by a judge who will be ruling on this case that's about anti-competitive conduct. This is known in US law as antitrust. The UFC ownership tried to have the case dismissed as meritless. They were denied. They sought a summary judgment asking for an immediate ruling in their favor without trial. They were denied again. Their last chance to avoid this case was arguing against the plaintiffs receiving class status, a crucial step for the lawsuit to go forward. Earlier this week, that status was officially granted and certified by the judge presiding over the case. The UFC is running out of options, and after nearly 10 years, this lawsuit might finally be heading towards its conclusion. I'm Tommy from MMA On Point. A huge thank you to our biggest channel supporters and our Hall of Famers. But what happens now?
And right there, it all came back in a rush. Why I do what I do. Defending the defenseless. Protecting the disenfranchised corporations that have been abandoned by their very own consumers.
The thing that makes America's government the best in the world, according to Nick Naylor in the hilarious Thank You for Smoking, is our endless appeals system.
Are you familiar with the term BS?
Bullshit.
Well, that's the beauty of argument. Because if you argue correctly, you're never wrong.
And that is undoubtedly what is next. The UFC will attempt to overturn the class certification that was just made official. If they succeed, the lawsuit is dead in the water. It's essentially over. Now, if you're like me, you watch Law & Order, you know how cop shows work. Aren't appeals normally for after the final judgment? You don't appeal your murder conviction before you are convicted of murder. Well, when it comes to class certification in class action lawsuits, the courts have granted the ability to appeal immediately after the order is given, so long as you file within 14 days. So there's a good chance that by the time this video goes up, the UFC will have already appealed the class certification, and trust me, they will be doing so. And while 2 weeks is not a lot of time to figure out how to best petition an appeal, especially when the judge's filing was 80 pages long like this one, the UFC knew this was coming. The certification had already been verbally granted literal years ago. It's just that the judge hadn't made the official ruling on paper yet until this week. And look, I mean, 80 pages is a lot to write. I put off big projects all the time too, so, I get it. Point being though, while they only have 14 days to file their petition for appeal, the UFC lawyers have been preparing for this for a long time now. But what exactly is it that they were preparing for? What does this 80-page document written by the judge presiding over the case say? Well, as you can imagine, it says a lot, and it's not exactly light reading. But I'll do my best to give you the highlight reel stuff stuff that matters, and if you're feeling bored, the document is publicly available, so go nuts. There were 2 class categories the fighters wanted granted, one being anyone who fought in the UFC during the period the suit covers, which is late 2010 to mid-2017, and the other being any fighter whose likeness was used during that same time. They got the first class, and they were denied the second one, but it was the former, known as the bout class, that mattered more. So it wasn't exactly the outcome they wanted, but it's the second best, and it means that the plaintiffs can go forward seeking class damages. Meaning, if they win, all 1,200 plus fighters who meet those criteria would be due compensation. The judge further ordered that the plaintiffs can seek injunctive relief.
What the hell is even that?
Well, this could end up being a bigger deal than anything else that comes from this case. Injunctive relief, if granted, would essentially require the UFC to immediately alter their business practices compliant with the official court order pertaining to the request by the plaintiffs. Meaning, if the judge ruled in the fighters' favor, the UFC might have to limit their contracts to 1 to 3 years with no extensions, and there could potentially be other provisions the court would include in this relief.
I still don't know what the lawsuit's all about.
Me neither. No. I'm sat here going, I have no idea what this is about. I don't know who's suing who for what.
I'm guessing it's some of the fighters are suing the UFC because by the sound that they didn't get as much money as they thought they should, maybe, for appearance money. I'm not sure.
I didn't hear that bit.
I think what he alluded to there was putting things in the future contracts to say that shortening the contracts maybe to a year or 3 years. Maybe it's just that when you sign a UFC contract, your hands are tied when it comes to loads of other things. That might be what they're kicking off about.
One of them was image rights, wasn't it?
I know that a lot of fighters used to make a lot of money by wearing the sponsors, on the shirts and the shorts and stuff. And I think the UFC may have got rid of it at one point, and they got an official sponsor of the UFC, like Adidas or someone, and everyone had to wear the same.
Yeah.
And then that took loads of money out of the fighters' pockets. I'm sure that's something that happened at one point.
It'd be something along the lines of the fighters wanting more money, I'm guessing, though.
Yeah.
It's kind of the editing threw me off as well.
Yeah.
All the movie clips and stuff like that.
There are 2 kinds of injunctions. A preliminary injunction, which would be effective immediately once granted, so if that happened, the trial wouldn't yet need to even take place for the UFC to have to start complying. The other is a permanent injunction, and that would be given after the case if the fighters were to win. I'm guessing you can understand what the word permanent means. So it's a huge deal, and possibly bigger than the amount of money that could be won. Even though, don't get me wrong, $5 billion is nothing to balk at. Now, just like class certification, injunctive relief can be appealed as well. So keep that in mind, as it will almost certainly happen if it is granted. This is going to be a long, slow, and brutal process no matter what. Alright, so those were the big rulings in the document, but the majority of the 80 pages of this class certification were made up of the judge discussing the particulars of the plaintiff's class status arguments and why he ruled that they were right to be granted certification. So it's essentially his justifications based on the details of the case as it's been presented to him so far by both sides. It's those justifications that the judge gave for the fighters meeting the criteria for class status that the UFC's legal team will have to successfully refute for their appeal to overturn the ruling. And again, if that happens, that is pretty much it for the fighters. But what are the chances that they are able to get this ruling changed? Well, apparently it's really hard to overturn class certification, as in it only happens about a quarter of the time. I'm no bookie, but those aren't very good odds. First, the UFC will have to get the 9th Circuit Appeals Court to even consider their petition, which from my research can be pretty damn tough in and of itself, and can be rejected without any cause or explanation given. Just sorry, nope, we're good, you go play. But if they do accept it, then they have to make a ruling on whether to overturn the lower court's decision, which is another massive hurdle of its own, and will require pretty substantial proof that the previous ruling was bunk. Again, this thing was 80 pages, and didn't exactly paint the UFC in the best light. Now, I know this may come
Ruthless coercive techniques.
was 80 pages, and didn't exactly
I'm still trying to figure out what the lawsuit's actually all about. I've not got a clue.
I'm totally lost. I don't watch the UFC.
But
So it's like, it's one of them where you listen to it and the way he's talking, I'm just like, I'm not sure. There was a UFC fighter on there yesterday, wasn't there, the day before? And the crowds were just ridiculous.
Who was it?
It's just one of them, like, what's it from? Dagestan or wherever he's from.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's one of them sort of fighters, I think. I've never heard of him.
Round here?
Yeah, he was in like, I want to say he was in like Rusholme or Didsbury or
Wow.
Levenshulme, something like that.
Yeah.
And the crowds were massive.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Wow.
To increase market dominance, plaintiffs, blah, 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 ruthless coercive technique to prevent fighters. Blah blah. It's probably to do with fighters not being able to earn money on the side while they're employed by the UFC.
Yeah, control time of the bouts, pairing of the fighters. It seems to me that maybe they sort of did everything. They said, right, this is who you're going to fight, this is when it's going to be, and they sort of controlled, by the sound of it, sort of everything, rather than being like boxing. It's more a case of two people getting together to try and get a fight on.
It's very different in boxing because it's governed by certain rules and certain regulations, whereas UFC seems to be governed by a company.
Yeah, by them, and then they say who you're fighting, who you're not fighting, and which direction you're going to go in.
So if you've got a contract that prohibits you from...
But it says there at the bottom, defendant controlled the timing of the bouts, the pairing of a fight. It looks like it's going to say there.
So you
something fight on a fight card, whether the bout will be pay-per-view. Yeah, see what it's... Yeah.
So it's like they're controlling everything,
revenue. It's to do with revenue coming in, isn't it?
Yeah, and they're saying, right, you sign a golden handshake sort of deal over 3 years where you're not allowed to work for anyone else, but maybe they're not giving you enough fights to sustain your life.
Yeah, you probably want... What they're probably saying is you sign...
pay-per-views.
By the sounds of it to me, it's something like, you sign up for the UFC for a year and we'll pay you $400,000, but we want a minimum X amount of fights. You've got to do this, you've got to do that. I put in the contracts, and a fighter might say 400,000. Yeah, I'll take that.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then they're generating 400,000 just on one fight, for example.
Or in the meantime,
profit.
Somebody might do well. This guy might do well. Someone else might put them together as pay-per-view. Yeah. Then they're going to make even more out of it. But they're still earning the same amount, aren't they?
Yeah.
So
I've heard stories of some of these fighters getting like 20 grand for a fight.
Yeah, but that's their own fault because that's what they're signing up for.
Yeah.
No one else can be blamed for that. They're not made to do it.
Well, someone will leave and go to rival organisations like Bellator and people like that pay better than the UFC for the lower level fighters. Yeah. But if you make your way up to the upper echelons of the game at the UFC, that's when you start making millions and millions.
All the fight games become a little bit of a pantomime at the moment because I watch boxing quite a lot and I just refuse to watch heavyweight boxing at the moment. It was another pantomime at weekend with Anthony Joshua. It's not worth watching. I'm like,
I didn't even watch it. I didn't know he was fighting.
Yeah, I thought.
I saw the clip of Conor McGregor ringside shadow boxing. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
And I didn't even know it was an Anthony Joshua fight. All I knew was Conor McGregor was watching some boxing and he's there going like that ringside.
It's just become a shit show.
It's a bit of a circus, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
Exactly paint the UFC in the best light. Now, I know this may come as a shock, but this appeals process can take a very long time. While friend of the channel and outstanding journalist John S. Nash told us in January that he was bullish on a potential 2024 trial date, assuming we get to that phase, Jason Cruz, who also covers the sport and is a lawyer who has written extensively on antitrust, told us we might not see a trial date until the late 2020s potentially because of the appeals process. I mean, this thing had a near 3-year delay because the judge didn't write up the certification that he had already granted verbally. So you can see why these things can get out of hand. But okay, there's a good chance that in the
I bet maybe the judge wrote something up and then the lawyer came back and said there's no I on that, there's no dot on that I, so it's not an official document, you need to go, but I bet there's some ruthless lawyers
making hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, they're the true winners, aren't they? If I was Dana White and you're going through all this drama and everything else, I'd probably be selling it off quietly.
Let's call it something else.
Well, you just get to just sell it to like the Saudis or whatever, just take the money and then just stay as a, I don't know, as like a consultant or something, and wash your hands of the whole lawsuit. Let someone else deal with it. Be a billionaire.
Next 1 to 7 years, this class certification appeal by the UFC is either thrown out at the petitioning phase or denied by the courts, and things are allowed to move forward. So what would happen next? A trial, right? Of course. Well, not necessarily. There could be some kind of settlement between the two parties. You have to remember how high the stakes are here. In antitrust suits, the court will award treble damages, meaning that if the fighters were to win the case, the amount of money they win triples and could end up right around $5 billion. Not to mention that injunctive relief could mean the entire business model of the UFC is flipped on its head. So that's not exactly something you would want to roll the dice on, right? Of course you would settle. Well, we'll get back to that in a second. But let's talk about the idea of a settlement. What might that actually mean? It would definitely be a massive win for the fighters if that took place. Honestly, things even getting to this point was already a huge deal. The UFC has been changing their contracts with things like the sunset clause as a result of this case. So the victory inquiries have already begun, but a settlement would be far more substantial. Now, it would certainly not end up with the fighters getting anywhere near $5 billion, far more likely somewhere in the hundreds of millions. But way more importantly, at least for the future of the sport, it could mean the UFC making some serious concessions as it relates to their contracts, similar to what the plaintiffs will be seeking in that injunctive relief. That alone could be a massive shift in how the UFC does business in favor of the fighters. But let's talk more about the idea of the UFC settling. When we talked with Jason Cruz, he believed that Endeavor will take their chances with a trial if we should get to that point and not seek settlement. Now, why would that be? Well, I've spoken with several lawyers and experts about antitrust and about this case in particular, and while of course it's not at all impossible that the fighters could earn a judgment in their favor, most that I spoke with weren't very optimistic about their chances of outright winning the case. And there are a whole bunch of reasons why this is going to be a tough sell. Reasons that go a bit beyond the scope of this video. After all, we're just talking about what's going to happen next, not necessarily why the outcome will be what it is. But if you would like an explanation as to why this will be a very difficult case for the fighters to win, go watch the more in-depth video about the suit that I did in 2022. Keep in mind, too, the judge that literally called the UFC's practices anti-competitive is presiding over this case, and most antitrust suits are bench trials, so no jury, meaning the UFC should seriously be sweating this. But all of this is massive speculation, so that is where we are at. This class certification was a huge monumental milestone in this case, but as I explained, it is by far nowhere near the end. We're more so at the beginning of the end. This was a step that was desperately needed to get the wheels back in motion, as things had stagnated quite a bit waiting for that official class certification. Now that we're there, things will hopefully move forward a bit faster, but don't hold your breath, you might not make it. That said, we'll of course keep you all up to date about everything that happens as it happens, even if Dana is 93 when this case is finally settled. How did I do breaking this all down for you? I'm of course by no means at all an expert, but I have been closely watching this case and talking to actual experts in hopes that I can then take what they said and help you understand and digest this all in a way that makes sense.
He explained it like an expert because it was like lawyer speak the whole time.
That's what I was going to say. It needs a lawyer to sit with me and say, this is what it means.
Yeah.
Plain talking.
And then go, right, and then you give your answer back. And then he puts that into lawyer speak.
Exactly. I think we sort of picked it apart and just about sussed out what it's about maybe there, haven't we?
Yeah.
With
I'm not sure.
all the information, but
They-
not 100% sure though.
They alluded to the Ngannou lawsuit before that, and I think he got released by the UFC to go and box, didn't he?
Yeah,
Isn't he?
It's fighting Tyson Fury.
He's fighting Tyson, and he'll probably get like 10 million quid for that boxing match. Whereas, I think he was like the champion at the UFC, the heavyweight champion.
Yeah, probably.
But he wasn't allowed to do anything.
Right,
and I think
okay.
he refused to fight, and they were going to strip him of belts because he wasn't going to fight because he wanted to take big money boxing fights instead. It's probably the fact that you're contractually not allowed to earn money fight in other organisations.
I wonder if with this boxing bout he's got, I wonder if he's come to an agreement with the UFC that they take some of the purse or something.
He got
maybe.
released from the UFC.
Just got released for it completely.
Yeah, I think he took him to court, and eventually it was like, just, you're done.
Yeah.
But motors up to the UFC, what's it, rankings, the boxing rankings. They want to fight Tyson Fury, who's a belt holder.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a bit.
I don't think it's for a title belt, is it?
I don't think
It
it's
can't
a
be,
title
can it?
fight.
It's not
you won't
boxed before, has he?
No.
But it's performative, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really, it should be the best of the best boxers fighting the best of the best boxers, and you don't just get an MMA guy go.
Yeah,
Screw it.
go.
I'll fight the heavyweight champion of the world. Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit. Yeah.
It's a bit of a mockery, isn't it?
It
Really?
is really.
The old sport's gone a bit bad.
I'm not happy that
way.
Tyson Fury's fighting him anyway.
No.
It does make a bit of a mockery of it.
Might be a
doesn't
good
it?
fight because he's got power punch, hasn't he? Sort of thing. But so's Tyson Fury.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think there's people saying that Ngannou could seriously hurt him because he's got a ruthless punch. But
So's Tyson Fury.
he has, and one's been
And
boxing.
so's
his
Deontay
whole
Wilder.
life.
And Deontay Wilder landed one flush on Tyson Fury. And Fury got up from that.
Yeah.
Imagine how much of a shocker it'd be though if Ngannou beat Tyson Fury, like just knocked him clean out.
If do you know what? If he did, I'd be thinking.
It's
do you know what?
possible.
He's got best of three wrote all over it. If it does,
Oh yeah.
I'd have to watch the fight, but I don't want to watch it.
Yeah.
Not interested.
Best of
no, I'm
three
with
over
you.
the next 3 years,
Yeah.
and it's worth
And
hundreds of
retirement,
million.
yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Anyway,
I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget like and subscribe. And we'll catch you on the next one.
Cheers, guys.